I think the point of the story is if you are so certain that your product is going to be a really good fit, it's not just a SDR sequence, let me call and email a few times and I recycle it back into the account pool once I'm done. It's a no, you should pull out every trick in the book because we're so certain that it's going to be a really good fit if we get them on the phone.
Everyone wants to build stronger pipeline, but only a few know how to make it happen. If you're listening to this show, you know outbound is not dead. You just need a little help building a system that actually works. Well, you're in the right place. I'm Todd Busler, and on this show, we're breaking down the plays, processes, and frameworks behind repeatable pipeline growth, straight from the people who built it. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, really excited to introduce John Ley to the show today. This is a little bit different than previous episode. He's an enablement leader, right? And any successful outbound function nails the enablement and training organization. John's the perfect person to explain how that function works. And if you're a sales leader, SDR leader, how to get the most from the enablement function. He's had a great run at Square, building the entire SDR organization, huge parts of ops and enablement. And then he was brought into Brex by their previous CRO, Sam Blond, to be his right-hand man. In this episode, he'll cover what exactly was brought into Brex to solve, what role does enablement play in a well-run sales organization, how he enables leaders, what he decides to focus on and how, and advice for sales leaders, VPs, CROs, getting the most from enablement. Enjoy.
Well, yeah, so when I first started at Enablement, my boss, Sam Blond, the CRO, I was an opportunistic hire. He didn't really know what to do with me, admittedly. And so he told me, just go survey the go-to-market teams and figure out what's not working and fix it. That was high level. And so I took that literally, and I would join the sales team meetings, and I'd have the sales manager ask the AEs to write down what's working and what's not working. I would see that 24 hours to find the meeting. I would show up with the slide, and it would be a list of what's not working. And I would make sure the room agreed with, is this the number one thing that's not working for you guys? And everyone would go on rants. And so this was not training related. This was our turnaround times with the finance to get our deals approved is taking way too long. I work with the ops and the risk team, and the process to communicate with them is broken. I don't have any way to quantify savings when I get into rebate conversations. Like real shit that would happen on a day-to-day basis that would just have them walking in quicksand. And so like my first project, I remember it was like organizing Salesforce case management. So we had a communication path with our risk team. Nothing enablement related, but it was something that once we shipped it, like saved people a ton of time. So that's a good place to start, is what I would say, is just audit what's not working. I would have sales reps tell me, dude, that is like so much more helpful than doing a Zoom and doing a discovery training or doing here's the 5 best principles for demo. They're like, just fix the shit that's broken for us right now.
Why do you think some of those managers weren't able to fix that? Was it because you were just talking across all of the different teams? What enabled you to go do that? Or is it just because you had the ear of the CRO?
Two things. One is the ear of the CRO helped, but two is I was just more poised. God bless the people. I was like a little bit more poised. I was a little bit more cross-functional. I could empathize when sales leaders would try to fix it. They'd come in so hot and they didn't know the solution. They would just be like, this is broken. What's going on? This needs to be fixed. And so it felt a little in haste, and they like weren't part of collaborating with a solution for it. So I'm like, hey, this is broken, but I also have a few ideas and I can help. And I have time to do it. I'm not distracted by calls and deals and
so I imagine you prioritized, you figured out like, all right, let me unblock some stuff really quickly, get everyone happy with what's happening. And then there's like prioritization of what to tackle next. How did it scale from there?
How did enablement scale from there?
Like you eventually build a team, you have to prioritize different things on a per monthly sprint or quarters. Like how'd you go about it?
The first thing that I'd say, and I know we've talked about this, what's not working. If you're like the first of its kind enablement profession, if I was joining Champify today, I would like really make sure that Champify has their sales process, well-documented stages, exit criteria, entry criteria. Like everyone needs to be really aligned. It sounds super cliche, but if you don't do that well, then like you have shit conversion data. You can't do anything effectiveness related. So I can't fast forward a year from now and run programs and be able to tell you, oh, I shortened a deal cycle or I improved conversion rates, or I improved a competitive conversion rate because we weren't even capturing competitive. So I think the like deal architecture in Salesforce is like first thing that you have to do. It's really boring grunt work and it's operational, but where you can get kicked out of the adults table really quickly on the enablement profession is if you can't show your own reporting and what impact what sort of KPI you're actually trying to influence, right? So like if the systems aren't designed and I'm like, oh, I'm doing this competitive training, but I have no way to measure how often this competitor's coming up or if it's working, like you get relegated pretty quickly. So I would say being more in charge of the data points that you want to influence is like priority number one.
What roles did you end up, or functions did you end up working with the most? Like you mentioned, like kind of compliance and risk and finance team. Then earlier, before we hit record, you were talking about the ICP, which is a combination of strategy, sales, and marketing. Like what ended up being some of the projects that moved the needle, and what teams did you find yourself maybe working with more than you expected going in?
Yeah, at Square, the traditional answer is, oh, enablement and product marketing work really closely together. And that's true, but I worked a lot with the teams that helped with throughput, a lot more than I thought. And so I'm calling out the finance team, calling out the Salesforce development team, I'm calling out our operational partners. We're a financial services company that you can get started without a contract, but we need to make sure we do KYC, we assess risk, you got to go through legal, finance. And so I generally found that you can make people a lot happier by just increasing throughput. So that was a surprise for me. I'd never worked with any of those teams when I was at Square.
It's interesting. Like, I think a lot of people think about enablement as like hardcore role plays and specific objection handling. And it's, look, if you can just unblock a lot of shit our best people are dealing with, there's a lot of alpha there.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
We were talking, Johnny, right before we hit record on like ICP, and you mentioned some costly or difficult learnings you had at your time at Square. I want to hear about them and then how you use some of those learnings. Because at Brex, at least feels from the outside, right? Like at different points in your journey, you've changed that ICP. Like, hey, we're not going to work with these companies that we originally targeted. And now you're moving up market. So I'd love to hear your kind of evolution of the understanding of the ICP and some traps for people to avoid.
Yeah, 100%. There was a very brief stint when I was at Square leading the sales development team. And at the time the program kickoff, it's like a numbers game. It's like how many leads, how many calls. You're building a capacity model more so than you're building a sort of a customer strategy. So you're building a lot of capacity models. And so a lot of these assumptions that we made around leads, we would get these huge lists, right? We would get these big lists from Dun & Bradstreet or ZoomInfo or whatever it is. And even think about something as simple as I want to look at the NICS code for restaurants. And like for that, you'd get a really, really wide spectrum. That could be anything from a McDonald's location to a fancy French bistro to an ice cream parlor in the middle of nowhere. Like those are all technically restaurants. And so what we really wanted to make sure wasn't going to happen is filling the top of the funnel with just a bunch of leads that aren't valuable for sales at all. And so I'm calling that ICP, but that's generally a good starting point. You and I, before we started recording, we're also talking about who's in charge of ICPs at organizations. Is it marketing? Is it data science? Is it RevOps? I've seen so many brilliant data scientists try to nail the ICP, and it never really works. I think function that knows the ICP the best are the sales reps that have been at organizations for at least 2 years. They've seen deals that they've gotten to the end where the customer wanted to join, but then ran into this roadblock. Or they've seen, oh shit, I never thought that would be a really good use case. And they end up finding sort of a pocket of customers that end up doing really well. So that's sort of
it seems like a maybe superpower you have, or just something you don't realize you're doing that a lot of people may not. Is just, let me go direct to the source on some of this stuff, get some like real feedback, do a good job synthesizing it, and then get the right people in the room to make the right decisions. Is that right?
That's right. That's at the end of the day, that's as simple as that. Is that let me interview about 4 or 5 people, and I'm really good at distilling it and organizing it in a way that people could digest on one page. But yeah, sometimes, yeah, that's how I think about the work.
I love it. John, I saw you said customer feedback, not just some internal opinions or thoughts, shaped some of Brex's biggest wins. And I'm curious how you started to, because Brex, when they launched, like I know I listened to a lot of Sam Blond stuff and really creative on getting into deals, but then scaled really quickly. So like, what involvement did you play in the outbound process? What was that journey look like? And what were some of your learnings there?
Yeah, so I would say a lot of the Sam Blond stories around, he thought very creatively on trying to leave a mark for early customers. And so Brex was a corporate card. We were startup. We were making cards for startups. And we knew, right? We talk about ICPs. We knew if you were a venture-backed startup that you've raised, you probably have these challenges that we had or a lot of founders had. And so we would go out of our way to do things like the deliver a fancy bottle of champagne during a fundraise. We would write, we call them grad cards for any company that would successfully go through their next round of fundraising. And there'd be cards for the company, and everybody, it'd be in the office in San Francisco, and everybody would write their name on it. So it was like we would know when startups would attend to a conference, and there's a kind of a famous folklore at Brex where Larissa Rocha at Brex figured out where these attendants would be staying at their hotel and personalized a Brex card and got the hotel staff to slip it under their door. So I think the point of the story is if you are so certain that your product is going to be a really good fit, it's not just a SDR sequence, let me call and email a few times and I recycle it back into the account pool once I'm done. It's a no, you should pull out every trick in the book because we're so certain that it's going to be a really good fit if we get them on the phone.
Yeah, I love that. It's like the unscalable stuff right now works really well. And it's also because a lot of people won't do that. But I think you make a good point in that it comes from the conviction that this person is such a good fit that makes it worth your time as someone to do that. Not just like, hey, I'm willing to do it. It really comes from the conviction.
That's right. That's right.
Talk to me, Johnny, about some of the onboarding from the rep perspective. I mean this from like, I'm sure you figured out over time what this rep profile looks like and how you've done like enablement at the manager level and figuring out, hey, how do I help these people recruit? How do I figure out what that profile looks like? And even through the onboarding thing, we were talking before you hit record when you said, do we actually enable these teams to go sit with people in customer success and understand how they're really using our product? So I know there's two big parts there. Take it any way you want. Were you involved much in the like hiring profile, who to hire, what did we learn? Not so much.
Not really. I know that was that's you started asking. Not really. I let managers do that for the most part.
And then on the second part, did you like build out like trainings, certifications, kind of first 90 days? How did the process at Brex get improved over time in terms of onboarding new reps? It's a big thing people are talking about, especially as they're trying to get more efficient and reduce ramp times. What were any of the big like step function improvements you've found or big learnings on that front?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's like four buckets of content that could be incorporated with a new hire program. There's some sort of async learning where reading materials you can have. There's some category of live trainings. I'm going to get in a room, show you a slide deck, hope you remember the information. On the job learnings where you now are practicing and shadowing your peers and that. And then there's what I'll call a certification. So like we're going to put you through some sort of exercise. It could be a call recording that you've already had with the customer, but it's a certification. We're going to make sure that you can nail one thing. I think a lot of people, as we've gone remote, have really gravitated towards the async and slide decks. So let's put as much as we can in the cloud so we can scale. The problem is those all really suck. Like AEs sit through these videos, or maybe they don't sit through their videos. Nothing gets retained. And so it's just kind of this catch-22 where more of the sort of real life simulation on the job is the important part, but it's tough to scale. But we do it anyway. So we make a point to have a certification process that reflects an actual sales deal. So like our certification is step one, first week. Can you target the right person? What are you saying? Why are you reaching out to them? What does a personalized phone call and a personalized email look like? They email that to me. They call my cell phone. So they have to call my cell phone. I decline it 3 or 4 times. I make them actually try to target me. That's the step one. Step two is a discovery call where we have a rubric and you get on the phone with us. Step 3 is how do you involve your solutions consultant to give a tailored demo? Step 4 is deliver a high impact proposal and try to like wrap up a deal with a couple personas. So we'll put like an economic buyer and the champion in the same room. Everyone's got their ready positions. And so we do those 4 things. We're like, if you can do those 4 things over the course of the first couple months, we think you're on a pretty good path moving forward. So I don't know.
Where do people struggle the most in those 4 parts?
Discovery.
Any part of it in particular, just not going deep enough, or any specific area?
I think one thing that we've really learned is the importance of use cases with your product. There's a big LinkedIn debate over the last couple of years that it's problems are more important than product, which I generally agree with. But I would say, like, to further that argument, I would say product use cases and how people consume it is way more important than product capabilities. So you definitely need to know your product. I would say it's hard to do really good discovery if you're not fluent with your company's use cases. What were customers using before? What was painful? What got unlocked when they joined your company? And now tell me about 5 different types of verticals that's true in. So you have to be a bit of a chameleon on discovery calls. And so now we've brought in a lot more shadowing our CSM org, actually getting on the phone with customers that have been around for a year to understand what they like about Brex, what it was like before joining Brex. So anyway, I really think deepening the understanding of your customer portfolio helps with better discovery.
I agree on the use cases part. I like that. Like you said, it's either focus on the problems or focus on the product. And it's actually in the middle there where it's like the before and after is what being used, how your product enables a specific use case or business process or something to be improved.
Yeah.
Who helps in that onboarding, whether it's 4 weeks or 4 different process? Is this all your enablement organization? Do you have sales leaders and even like high flying ICs getting involved in certain components of this? Because a common pushback I hear from sales leadership is, look, I don't have the time to do this. Who's responsible for this? How have you guys scaled that?
Yeah, no, that happens all the time. And the short answer is yes, we do rely on a bench to help us. I would say there's a combination of sales. So if you're a sales manager, you always like 1 30-minute slot a month. If you can't afford 1 30-minute slot a month, the size that we're at, that works for us. Generally, when ICs and sales reps get asked to join, it's part of like a team lead position that they're in, or they like volunteered to be a sidekick because it's part of their like management track. And so that's where I think the relationship with your people teams generally helpful is identifying that there are specific responsibilities depending on what sort of track you're on. But yeah, I would say like enablement teaches a third, leadership and sales reps teach a third, and then I would say XFN partners teach a third. It's nearly impossible for one person to be a subject matter expert on everything. So that just like won't work.
Yeah, that makes sense. You have to split up. The last part I want to dig into here, one thing that I think has really changed in the last 10 years of software sales is the markets are changing so quickly. We all hear about all these AI-oriented companies that can develop product way faster. I'm sure you're seeing it at Brex. We're seeing it at Champify. It changes the competitive landscape. There's new features that you have to continue to enable people. Have you like changed the frequency and cadence on how you do competitive education or product updates? Because it is faster than ever. And I wonder how people are approaching it at a larger scale.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think back on, as somebody that's owned competitive programming, I think back on where I would spend a lot of my energy just a couple of years ago. And I have like a library of decks, and I would break down, like you go to a website and it's a bunch of, oh, here's all the green checks that we have and all the red X's that they have. Like sales does not want that. Sales wants shooting straight. Why am I going to maybe lose this deal? And so I had a lot of like very practical, this is where we're getting crushed. This is where we're actually really crushing them. So this is how you do it. And I have to do that on a number of different competitors. And now I'm spending a lot of my energy on working with internal engineers to develop a chatbot. So I'm like, what's the point of making 50 decks when I can just start referencing internal documentations or help centers or external resources, and I can just query that. So it's like, imagine I'm an SDR that doesn't have that much context. I'm reaching out to this controller and I want to give them an objective stance on these 2 comparisons. Where we're putting a lot of our energy is with tooling with the engineering team. So now I can just start querying, where do we beat and where do we lose a certain competitor? And like we think that if you federate that to all the employees as opposed to a series of decks, then, how could that not be the competitive program?
100%. That's it. That's definitely it. Like, I think we're going to laugh in like maybe months. Oh, we're going to once every 2 weeks or once a month, we just pick to do that. Like, why wouldn't you just ask this thing, or a bot's going to get updated based on calls that we're having? That's definitely the way it's going to go. What advice do you have, John, being in your position for, I think a lot of people that listen to this are first-time VP of sales or first-time CRO and trying to learn from a lot of their peers. I think if you're that first-time sales leader hiring enablement for the first time, what advice would you have for those people?
So CROs that are looking for a first-time enablement hire, I would recommend you do 3 things. One is find somebody that has a sales background that wasn't a sales reject. That can be hard to do, right? That can be hard. That narrows the pool, but that's a really important part, especially if this is like a first of a kind enablement hire. If you miss that, somebody can get laughed out of the room, not taken very seriously. Like, you want somebody that's been at sales manager, sales rep, wasn't a reject, did pretty good, had an opportunity to get promoted into enablement. That's kind of what you're looking for. And hopefully you can find that person. The second thing that you want is somebody that can, there's two things this person's going to need to do. One is make trainings that don't suck. So they have to be interesting, have a point of view on something. They can collaborate with their peers really easily. Make trainings that don't suck. The third thing that they need to do is present a strategy on how they want to build enablement. That could be what's the enablement service model? How do I intake people's ideas and prioritize? What would I do with the second enablement hire? What would I do with the third enable? You need somebody that can put together a basic plan. So it's those 3 things I'd vet for. 1, practical sales experience, somebody that's trusted. 2, build trainings that don't suck so people take you seriously. That's your field validation with the field. 3 is, can you put together how you would grow an enablement team as we grow over time?
I like that third part as a way to okay, there's always shit that's broken, right? There's always some IC or manager saying, why don't we have this? How do we make this better? And you need some way to go about that. Yeah. I agree with the first part too. I think I've worked at organizations where people would sit there and see a sales enablement leader and you could just tell there's no listening happening here. It's who is delivering the message is, whether we like it or not, important.
Yeah, I agree. And teams get bigger, and sometimes people have this content specialization. That's right. Not a blanket statement, but I'm talking about if you're really trying to find somebody to anchor the team around, like a pillar for the team, those would be the 3 things I wouldn't compromise on.
Love it. Johnny, this was awesome. Appreciate it. I thank you for your time. Congrats on the run you had at Brex. I appreciate you taking some time to sit down with me.
Todd, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Cracking Outbound. If this was helpful, let us know by messaging me, Todd Busler, on LinkedIn, and share this episode with a friend that you think will be interested. If you want more resources about building and scaling all things outbound, you can sign up for our newsletter at champify.io/blog.